Welcome back to the Tricorian newscast of the latest turn of the Game of Shadows. Political news from near and far. This turn was the third quarter of the year 9 in the Tricorian Reckoning, 9 years since the inauguration of the Chronolob. Third quarter means that it's slightly more than a year since the events on the fateful events on the island of Marjura. And let's go over what has happened. We start, of course, with Milaki in the north. And here we have some vintners serving the Princess of Folda. The vintners come bearing gifts, the finest of Nastrol for their new Milaki friends. Why should the wine trade be controlled by the Paratornians? Their products were inferior. Any who said otherwise was deluded by imperial propaganda. Wine simply tasted better when it was produced by a free people, instead of a coercive process soaked in blood. They come away with several promising business deals, and this is a mobilization, leveling up the vintners from level 1 to level 2. Also, the Transmiran Republican Army mobilizes. Outside of town, in the rolling foothills, passing Transmirans are greeted by the sight of Larmans bellowing a battle cry. To each he issues a challenge. Will you stand with a band like a true Transmiran and go fight the forces of the crown? Will you march with Larmans to a native battleground? For tonight we go to free old Rakma town. Their ranks under the banner of the burned child increase. So the tier A goes from level 1 to level 2. In Humbergond, meanwhile, the free Fire Mountain Crones will also be leveling up from level 3 to level 4. Birgit, Coven Leader, stands in a ritual circle of her sisters and speaks. Enough! Inashtar's gifts are blasphemed by the Tricorian interlopers here on the Lady's sacred grounds. Flame will no longer be their weapon against Inashtar's people. Sisters, not while we have a breath in our bodies and grace in our hearts. Birgit raises her hands. Inashtar, for the sake of your burned child, safe now in your bosom, remove your protection from the invaders. Let not your tools serve them in war or peace while they tarry on our native soil. As Simbas' forces herd Transmirans into the center of town and bring their torches to nearby buildings, they are confounded by a most curious thing. The buildings refuse to kindle, no matter how much accelerant is added. Campfires, if they light at all, become tiny sick things that do little to warm the troops. In Simba's keep, the great hall grows cooler as the hearth refuses to light. Throughout Humbergond, flame ceases to serve the Empire. And so, the Fire Mountain Crones level up from level 3 to level 4. The Lasemosi Knights will also level up. To Lasemosi eyes, the region looked peaceful and prosperous. There was some displacement, but not to an abnormal degree, surely. The Knights of Lasemos were an impressive sight and soon attracted a band of curious children. Not wanting to accidentally start a fight, the Knights inquired about rival houses. What were their colors? Where did their lands begin? Things any Lasemosi child would know. After much head-scratching, the description they received was of the Tricorians, which naturally led to a recounting of recent imperial brutality. The Knights politely commiserated about the poor burned child since their escort was clearly upset. Did Transmirans not teach their children what to do in the event of a raid? The Knights quietly set about rectifying this apparent deficiency. To build their confidence, one of the Knights proudly recounted how their new sovereign lady, the famously soft-hearted Princess Folda, had killed a Tricorian soldier in self-defense at the tender age of 6. And so the Lasimosi Knights go from level 1 to level 2. In Kark, things are also happening. The guards mobilize. The streets are heavily patrolled by guards, ensuring that the flow of goods from the harbor make it to their intended locations or the city gates. Kark is a safe haven for all who embrace freedom. Magic lingers in the air from anti-creationist and creationist magic alike. And is that a wolfkin patrolling with him? So the guards go from level 2 to level 3. The illusionists also mobilize. They learn a lot from Fundibera and her people and go from level 3 to level 4. Fundibera, after all, being a master illusionist. Goskana, the Skugras actors in Kark also mobilize. They keep collecting connections to local power holders by staging plays exclusively for them and talking to them a lot backstage after every play, learning much about their secrets for future use. We move to Mixa. The naval officers here make use of their time in more dangerous waters that surround the small island territory. They practice and hone their navigational skills around the reefs and shoals. And so they level up from level 2 to level 3. But the Milaki nobles, they attack the naval officers, using 4 fate dice to do this. The nobles had journeyed to Mixa on a pilgrimage, intending to honor their history with the island. Horror and alarm runs through those gathered when they see Tracorian-flagged ships circling around the island, engaged in naval maneuvers. Lemur's warnings were true. The Empire has sent more troops in response to Simba's call for aid in burning out the rest of the continent. Honor and alarm turns quickly to fury. Has the Empire no shame? Is nothing sacred to them? Truly, they will stop at nothing to fill their minds with slaves again. With a roar born from generations under the Tracorian boot, the nobles deny this new attack. Men, women, and children raise to their motley fleet of fishing vessels and pleasure barges, and make all speed directly at the heart of this invasion force. No more Bayan Ashtar. They will fight to prove that bravery and honor did not die with their forebears. As the ships close, cries can be heard floating out of over the water. Free Trinsmira! Trinsmira forever! Death to the invaders! And Fundibera's priests faithfully appeal to the moon goddess, complete with sacrifice for assistance in defending Trinsmiran waters. The tides shift subtly in the defenders' favors, allowing for a favorable departure from Mixen shores. 11 dice versus 3 for the naval officers, and of those 11 dice, all but 3 are successes, and in fact 4 are 6s. 4 6s plus 1 equals 5 damage to the naval officers, and they all perish. There are none left when this is over. We move on to Palamux. In Fontrasilor, the courtiers will raise inference to level 3, and Princess Folda bet 4 fate dice on this. While the princess and her warlord toured Palamux on honeymoon, despite their obvious differences, the two were very much in love, it seemed. The young nobility used the exhibition of exotic animals to emphasize the former's global reach. They also made something of a parade out of their eventual transfer to the Academy at Maravelda, where they were to become a permanent exhibit. This helped draw a large crowd for the returning princess's speech, to take place in the shadow of her ancestor's proud statue. She took the stage to speak, accompanied by a Shamashi priest, black-clad and severe. She described and endorsed the Holy Kishat's decryptification campaign, in which she herself had just participated, under the oversight of the priest at her side. I am tutored in such things, but it is clear even to me that the dead do not rest easily here. We are a people haunted by the past. This had, of course, been a painful experience, with her beloved grandmother's death still so recent. But this is a pain I welcome, for it reminds me of the truth, of who I am and what I have sworn to do. Before she died, my grandmother extracted a promise that I would restore our legacy, something the Dracorians tried to extinguish forever by murdering my entire family. She then describes how she had received the fealty of King Ambrion of Karasma, making the noble's earlier proclamation seem no longer quite so hollow. And so, I say to you now, I am, by the grace of the gods, Georgiana Groteschi, suzerain of Karasma, Princess of Folda, Duchess of Moscoria, and, if you will have me, Empress of the Clavicians. Join me in refusing to be haunted by the past. Together we will secure a glorious future. And having said as much, she stepped out from the shadow of the statue and into the brilliant Palamoxy sun. The laborers are assisting her, of course, with 4 dice. They construct a series of statues and monuments in her lady's name. And they roll 12 dice altogether. This is beyond successful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 successes out of the 3 she needs. And so she gains, in fact, influence level 3 in Fontaine, dominating the sphere and removing Gerion's influence there. And she will use 1 fate die to buy herself a new resource called Partisans, level 1. And finally, privateers of Lemur Spades are in Fontaine. They arrive there, of all places, with Transmiran letters of marque in hand. They cry throughout the town, seeking 20 brave men and women to fill out their crews. They're told that they will cruise the seas for Dracorian gold, fire no guns, and shed no tears. And thus they level up from level 1 to level 2. There we go. And we go on to Moscoria. The trade captains are working for Duchess Clenora da Spinalunga. Everyone knows the true power is in exchange of goods and services are only available when goods are available. In spite of the lukewarm reception in Palamux thus far with the riots and rebellions, trade has occurred, and in these turbulent times, people appreciate making friends with merchants and traders who make sure that they have access to necessities. Even the definition of necessity is rather vague at times. And the knights provide the trade captains of protection in these unknown lands filled with strife, even as Shamashi priests under the Kishat come along for spiritual enrichment of the local Moscorians, explaining to them how the usurper Gerion has filled their hearts with false promises, which in fact are blasphemous to Shamash, while the spies try their best to negate this information warfare. The total tally is 5d6, and the total successes are 2, so Clenora does in fact succeed in raising her influence. Oh, also she's supported by Rovendo Alicella, the Duke, and his contacts, who know exactly which people to speak to make these particular deals. So Clenora da Spinalunga ends up with 1 level of influence here in Moscoria. Despite Gerion Groteschi's best efforts. We move on to Zidisbar, I believe. Yep. In Zidisbar, the scholars mobilize. Folda scholars make a pilgrimage to the finger of Shamash, meditating on the nature of truth. They consolidate their notes and prepare to present their findings. And so the scholars go from level 3 to level 4. The loyalists are also mobilizing. Words spread about dramatic events in Peraltro, inspirational to Palamuxi national pride, which swells their ranks. And the loyalists are now level 2. So we move on to Paratorno. In Iliboria, Goskana the Skugra's agents refine their skills. They make practice scenarios for spying, disseminating false information, and collecting blackmail material from locals, learning exactly where to hide, how to walk around inconspicuously, and generally becoming better at their craft. In Peraltro, let's start there. The inconspicuous witches there attack Guba Dagrumi. Fundibera assists. Fundibera smiled as her witches moved smoothly through the crowd of pilgrims to the Pillar Father and Goddess Kastik. She found the grotesque statue of the goddess Vulgar and vowed to have it broken down limb by limb and melted. Ahead of them, Guba spoke with the temple priestess, surrounded by guards. One witch seemed to stumble and slashed open her palm along the appointed tip of a brazier post. The bright blood was a worthy enough sacrifice for the task ahead. Another witch wove the spell, and the anti-creationist magic tinged the air. Goba's soldiers turned toward the source, most moving toward the threat, while some stayed to protect their commander. More magic filled the air, and for a few moments, all stood fixed on the grand illusion before them. Simba. The child's gut-wrenching screams, the animalistic wails from a mother who had lost everything, herself next for the flames. The scene of the burned child played out for them all. This was the cost, the true price of their metals, their prosperity, their wealth. Prance heard the commotion, or rather, did not hear the familiar temple sounds outside the window of the infirmary. Head aching but with clear vision, she moved to the window to see what was happening. She too was transfixed by the illusion, the screams, the fire, the burned child. Too late she saw Fundibera in the crowd. Too late she saw the witches close in. The crowd stood frozen for but a handful of seconds, but it was enough for a mortal blow. The mentalists have been there for months, using their magic to sow doubt among the citizens, to the point of revolt, in which a prominent citizen stands up and declares, "It started with a dull itch deep inside, the uncomfortable feeling of something not right. 1, 2, 3, 4 whispers of discontent spread. The Digita Longa has preyed on us for decades. Everyone knows if they take you, you're never seen again. Decades of fear. They've stolen everything. Assets, families, lives, even the very idea of freedom." The itch grew stronger over time until it began to pulse like a beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, not a war horn or a battle cry, but the beat of terrified hearts that know deep down that this is wrong. When will we be free of our oppressors? Now is the time to throw off the boot of oppression that has crushed the throat of generations. No longer whispers now, but shouts. The beat echoed in the pounding of fists. 1, 2, 3, 4. We will take back our dignity, our sense of security, and everything else they stole. Now is the time to topple empires, to bleed those who exalt themselves like gods. 1, 2, 3, 4. We march to war! Said prominent citizen. I'm sure is immediately arrested and swears that he has no memory of that outburst. But the mentalists are not the only ones helping out with this attack on Guba Dagrumi herself. The Transmiran Highlanders are also there. Perhaps the Digita Longa would have seen it coming and perhaps had time to gather troops and police to prevent the attempt. But a masked man arrived weeks before and brought with him Highlanders with murderous rage in their hearts. They filled the bars, the back alleys, and the markets, sometimes leaving scrawled graffiti depicting the burned child or the bold phrase "Trinsmira forever," sometimes haranguing expatriate Trinsmirans to give up their Tracorian ways and help free their homelands, sometimes starting barroom brawls over insults, real or perceived, to Trinsmira, sometimes quenching swords in the bodies of Tracorian soldiers on leave who die with mockery in their ears. Messing with children was more your speed, wasn't it, hero? With Tracoria's eyes and ears occupied, the attempt commences. From a hill overlooking the town, the man sees it begin. After a sign, some of the Highlanders head into town to collect their comrades and leave, as does Lemur Sped himself. He leaves behind a token, last seen in Arham's high town, and a slip of paper. If any passers-by chance to find it, the words will mean nothing to them. The high tower belongs to her no longer, and vengeance will not be denied. Even Folda's merchants are there to help with this attempt on Guba da Grumi's life. They spread the tale of what had happened to Bodville Scoffer through Paraltro's famous wharf district, an account which had, of course, been verified by Fabricus Veritas. It began with accusations of weapon smuggling, so patently ridiculous that even the rubes of Arham, who hated the civilized on principle, had not believed them. Then came the clumsy cover-up attempt by the Digitalunga, who burned the house supposedly containing evidence of his treachery to the ground. When the merchant protested, they tried to have him killed, and never mind the consequences to the sulfur trade. Despite being forced to flee town, Master Scoffer had landed on his feet. It was impossible, after all, to ruin those who were truly blessed by Castique. But that did raise a question. Who among them would survive if they were similarly targeted? The local merchants proclaimed themselves unconcerned, at least publicly. After all, they were among the blessed too. But why was the Digitalonga so willing to put their own political power above the holy pursuit of profits? Perhaps someone should teach them a lesson in humility. By the time the violence starts, the witches and their unwilling co-conspirators among the citizenry are surprisingly well equipped. The soldiers do their best, of course, to protect Guba da Grumi from this assault from so many different corners. But the attackers now can roll 17 dice, and the defenders roll 9. And the defenders rolled 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 4, 6, 1. That is 7 successes. The attackers with 17 dice rolled 8 successes, I think it was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 successes actually, but more sixes than Guba da Grumi rolled, and also the attacker wins on a draw. So however we count it here, the attackers succeed by the skin of their teeth. The soldiers protecting Guba are doing an excellent job. They probably managed to slay many of the Trinsmira nobles trying to get to Guba and almost get all the way to Fundibera. But Fundibera held the bloody cloth to her neck. Guba's strike nearly mortal. Close, too close. She murmured to the Highlanders to carry Guba's body to the edge of the Red Cliffs. After a few ceremonial words for the blood both had shed, Fundibera motioned with a flick of a finger. The Highlanders obliged and sent Guba's body over the edge. And so Guba da Grumi's career has ended. She is dead at the hands of all these co-conspirators. She is gone from the board, and so are all her influence and resources. And that means that we have the first shadow power that has been eliminated from the board in this game of shadows. Big event. In fact, the only resource that has not been used so far is in Golmadukella's organizers in Paraltro. The Wigmaker's arrival in Paraltro was almost unnoticed, as the forces against Guba piled into the chaotic shores. The family watched quietly and realized a power vacuum was soon to be available. Their plans quickly shifted to organizing the people in the aftermath, rallying any of Gobal's remaining soldiers and spies under a new banner, trying for influence level 2. 5 dice, but only 1 success, so it fails. As much as they tried, the chaos was too much even for them, and the soldiers heeded not their words at all. And so, Ingol Madikella received no influence at all in Peraltro. We go to Rule, where the alchemists make another attempt, like last time, to control the locals in Rule by giving them suggestions on their dietary needs, and again tries to smuggle in the right substances in their food and so on. They have 2 dice for their influence. They have 1 more for adjacent influence that gives them 3, and then they have their 4 dice for alchemists. So that is 7 dice altogether. And they finally make it with 3 successes, a 6, a 5, and a 5, and a 6. 4 successes, in fact. So Goskana Daskugri gets his influence level 3 in Rule, finally. He acquires a new resource called Mercenaries level 1. We go to Hudjar. Here the foresters hold their secret meetings, continuing to embolden the other workers. Together they can rally and demand the respect they deserve. No longer should they tolerate the disrespect of being hunted like boars for sport. They are the workers, they have the power. Together they can rise and make their reasonable demands be heard. Trying to raise influence here for Clenora da Spinalunga from 2 to 3. The Fire Tongues will help, making sure that their presence is available to help with their revolt. They are workers and deserve reasonable demands. 7 dice with 5 successes, and so Clenora da Spinalunga gets her influence level 3. And she will buy a new resource called Foot Soldiers level 1 for 1 of the newly acquired fate dice. We move to Tresilva. The bankers in Tresilva. Let's have a look. There we go. They returning from their inability to win over in Newmark, they double down on their home turf's businesses and mobilize from level 4 to level 5. We move to Newmark. Here, the enforcers, well, sometimes business opportunities need motivation, and the wigmakers and enforcers are known for their quick and decisive actions. Any illicit businesses operating outside the family's purview, they attempt to thoroughly quash. Intimidation comes first, force comes next. They try to go influence level 1, and they have, in fact, 3 dice altogether, because Ingol Madukella only has 2 fate dice left to bet on this, but she gets a bonus die from neighboring influence, and she rolls a 1, a 5, and a 5, so she finally gets her level at 1 influence in Newmark. And there it is, level 1. We go to Malusa next. Here, the merchants are working for Clenora da Spinalunga. With the fall of the new sphere and the disgrace of Duke Camesti, with all of his assets and goods being seized as declared by the Bodak, now is the time to get their own foothold and take advantage of this blessing from Castique. And so they mobilize from level 1 to level 2. We move to Bralorga, where nothing happens because there is no resource. And then to Britalva. Here, the mummers of Fundibera mobilize in the town of Grum. One would be amazed at the acting talents of the formerly enslaved that the mummers picked up in one back alley or another, but they had seen it too often for wonderment. They lived it. The mummers knew intimately how unnecessarily false subservience and wisecracking were to survival as a slave. The escapees disappeared within costumes, behind a mask of makeup, or beneath a well-crafted wig. They disappeared and they joined the ranks of the acting troupe, which levels up from level 3 to level 4. And the ladies in waiting and the Duchess Clenora. Summer is here, and now is the time of growth and anticipation of the bountiful harvest that grow. The algae bloom in the carefully cultivated lakes and pools and promise of a rich bounty. What a better time to take a break and organize festivals to the summer solstice. The people have worked hard, and it is time to appreciate the excess to come. And Clenora is raising influence from 2 to 3. She rolls 7 dice and gets 4 successes and will succeed thus in getting her influence level 3. And she will use one of the fate dice she won on that to buy a new resource called Water Mages 1. In Karamak, nothing happens this turn because there are no resources there, so we move on to Safina. And we start in Cordiolma. The fishermen are working on raising influence from level 2 to level 3 together with Sambars in Korea. They see their local Baru arrive in town and sell their traps and fish to the locals at little or no cost. Baru wants to make sure that everyone gets their fair share, and free fish is good fish as far as the locals are concerned. He has 7 dice for this, but only rolls 2 successes, so the local Apothecaries Guild and the Tricorian Procurator are not impressed and will not be swayed to start acting in the interest of the Inquisition, keeping their hold on secular power for now. In the Frimboline Plains, the farmers mobilize from level 3 to level 4. They stock up on extra grain and livestock, preparing for unknown seasons ahead. And so the farmers are now level 4. And in Ardahals, Gubaragumi's alchemists are of course gone because of her demise, and the witch hunters mobilize from 3 to 4. Hearing news from the Baru, they sharpen their tools and make sure that none shall invade their shores, leveling up from level 3 to level 4. And that concludes this turn of the Game of Shadows in Dracoria, the 3rd quarter of year 9. Very dramatic. The Digitalonga director has fallen. There's a power vacuum. Someone new will have to step up and lead the Secret Service, the long finger of the Dracorian Empire, and only time will tell who this might be. Thank you for watching.